What is up and welcome back to Working Hard. And it is that time of the month, it is deep dive episode time. And as always, I have done a ton of research and spoken to experts so that you don't have to sift through all of the self-improvement information out there. The idea with these episodes is that they are a shortcut to theories that could genuinely help you to level up your entire life. And you can get them all in one walk, commute, or while doing the dishes. Everything is evidence-based and everything is designed to help you improve your life. So today we are diving into something that so many of us struggle with: people pleasing. The habit of constantly saying yes, feeling guilty when you say no, and tying your worth into the approval of others. It can be exhausting. Let me tell you, I know from experience. And worse, I genuinely think it can hold you back from achieving what you actually want in life. I can say with confidence that I changed as a person when I became aware of my people pleaser traits. And I'm saying became aware of rather than fixed because it's not fixed and it is a journey. But in this episode, we are going to break down the psychology of people pleasing, why it happens, and what science says about it. And most importantly, I'm speaking to the amazing psychotherapist Emma Reed Turrell all about how to manage your people pleasing traits and stop holding yourself back. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love you to like and subscribe. Only 10% of solo episode viewers subscribe to our channel, even though we can see them coming back month after month. And we are committed to doing these every month now for you to watch for free. Subscribing is the best thing you can do to help our small team. You can also now, very excitingly, follow us on Instagram at Working Hard Pod. I really wanted to create a space for everyone who has listened to this podcast and who has this mindset around life improvement and learning about things that aren't just under this life improvement umbrella of, say, wellness, but also includes things like finances and corporate and career Q&As, all of that. And also just a space for everyone who has listened to this podcast for over 3 years now to chat, share ideas, keep ourselves accountable, celebrate our wins, and help each other. So that is at Working Hard Pod, and I will see you there. So let's get into the context. People pleasing is something that so many of us struggle with, but I think it often goes unnoticed because you literally get praised for doing it. Being nice, helpful, and selfless are obviously seen as good qualities. And I would say they are seen as expected qualities, especially for women. But when taken to the extreme and used at the expense of our own well-being, they can impact your life so negatively. Quick disclaimer before we get into the science: I am not a scientist. I have a music degree, would you believe? But I do love learning as much as I can about these and all topics and speaking to experts so that we can all learn more together and start our weeks off on the right foot. And second disclaimer is that people-pleasing does not equal just being a kind and polite person. They are two very different things. And you can be a kind person whilst also having your own boundaries, which is what we very much aspire to do so that we're not holding ourselves back and negatively impacting ourselves just to appear likable to everyone else in every single moment of every single day. So, psychologists define people-pleasing as a behavioral pattern where someone prioritizes others' needs over their own to avoid conflict, gain approval, or feel a sense of belonging. I think there is one key takeaway from that definition, and it is that, as I've said, people-pleasing isn't just about wanting to be nice. It's motivated by fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, or fear of not being liked. And in my research, I found that like many ingrained behaviors, people-pleasing often stems from childhood. Essentially, if you grew up in an environment where love and validation were conditional, meaning if you feel more accepted when you were good or helpful, your brain might have learned that pleasing others equals safety. Again, I think there's a gendered element here. How often as kids were we told to be good, nice, and quiet girls, whilst parents or teachers would say boys will be boys? If we're told that our worth is dependent on making other people happy, we internalize that and take that into womanhood. So, how do we untangle this? We're going to start with the theories behind why we people please. Because as we know on this side of the internet, the more we understand something, the more likely we are to be able to overcome it. So firstly, we're revisiting our old friend attachment theory, which was coined by John Bowlby in 1969. We've done a whole episode on this theory and how it impacts your romantic relationships if you really want to get into it. But essentially, if you grew up with caregivers who were sometimes inconsistent or only affectionate when you behaved well, you might have developed anxious attachment, meaning you seek approval as a form of security, which is also known as people-pleasing. And if you thought that was enough of me telling you that people-pleasing was caused by our trauma, you are wrong. In 2013, Pete Walker came up with a theory called the fawn response, which is a lesser-known trauma response where instead of fight, flight, or freeze, you respond to stress by pleasing others to keep the peace. Essentially, if you find yourself constantly saying yes, avoiding confrontation, or feeling responsible for others' emotions, it may be because you've been wired to prioritize external harmony over internal well-being. So now we've got all of that happy fun trauma stuff out of the way, let's move on to the data. Once we start people pleasing, it is pretty hard to stop. So I've definitely found it one of the hardest habits to break. There are reasons why we just love nothing more than to people please, and I've split these into 3 parts. Number 1 is our brain's reward system, dopamine. Neuroscientific studies, such as a recent one in the Cognitive, Affective and Behavioral Neuroscience Journal, show that getting social approval activates the brain's dopamine system, the same system that lights up when you eat pick and mix or win a game of Articulate. This is pretty simple, but it means that when someone praises you for saying yes or being accommodating despite it bulldozing your boundaries, your brain treats that as a reward, reinforcing the habit and encouraging you to say yes until infinity, and you're just a pile of other people's responsibilities. Okay, so reason number 2, which is called the cortisol connection. Research from the University of California indicates that the fear of rejection activates the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response. So essentially, when we anticipate disappointing someone, our stress hormones spike, and saying yes or agreeing to something you're actually not sure you want to do becomes a way to avoid the short-term discomfort, even if it's going to end up causing you more discomfort in the long run. And finally, there's the link to anxiety. A study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that individuals who habitually engage in people-pleasing behavior are more likely to experience increased stress levels and poorer mental health, including conditions such as anxiety and depression. So, once you enter the people-pleasing cycle, it often compounds and compounds, making it harder to stop. But do not fear. I'm not just going to leave you with all of this sad information and without any solutions. Let's actually get into how you stop. So I've actually found 5 strategies based on theories that I've tried and they do work for me. Definitely just give them a go yourself and see if they work for you. So number 1 is the pause and check-in rule. This is the simplest but most effective one in my opinion. Before saying yes to a request, whether that is a night out with a friend or a favor for someone, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. Do I need to do this? How will I feel after doing this? And am I being clear or evasive? There are obviously things that you won't want to do but need to do. So for example, if your manager asks you to do a key task at work or your partner asks you to finally do the dishes. But stopping people pleasing doesn't just mean you're not doing anything you don't want to do. It just means knowing when you're opting for the easy option in a social situation at the expense of yourself or the situation as a whole. If you've asked yourself those 3 questions and you're still unsure about whether to say yes or no, you can always respond with, "Let me get back to you." I think nowadays everyone expects immediate responses and replies and therefore immediate decisions, but this gives you time to evaluate your true feelings instead of automatically agreeing. I always think about Jasmine Larian, the founder of Cult Gaia, who introduced me to her motto, "Clarity is kindness." It really is the antidote to people pleasing. For example, if you said yes to a social plan on a day where you know deep down it's at the end of a really busy week and you're likely to be too snowed under or to feel terrible and you're going to cancel at the last minute, it is much kinder to the other person to say with weeks to go or more time that you are not going to make it, rather than putting off the disappointment to the last minute and letting them down and making yourself feel worse after. Okay, number 2 is the 1-sentence no practice. Saying no is a skill, and it can often feel super overwhelming to elite people pleasers like me. But the best way to start using it is to choose a simple, direct response and practice using it daily, even if it's for minor things. Something like, "I'd love to, but I just can't commit right now." Having a set sentence and repeating it helps actually build up your confidence and makes saying no feel more comfortable to you before you actually build up to using the word itself. I know this sounds ridiculous, but if you're still people-pleasing, you might not realize how much of a negative association you attach to just telling people no. So that might be you, and it might be ridiculous, but you might need to try it. Number 3 is to keep a log of every time you're proud of yourself for not people-pleasing and setting a boundary. Each time you say no or set a boundary or say the hard thing that you've been putting off, write it down in your planner or the notes app on your phone. Over time, this builds internal validation, which boosts your dopamine away from the spike you get when you say yes to everything to everyone else, and shows you tangible proof that standing up for yourself and what's best for you and your well-being, rather than being evasive, leads to better outcomes. Number 4 is to visualize yourself handling difficult situations. Now, if you've listened to this podcast before, you will know that I have recently been introduced to visualization. If you're unconvinced, I'd recommend listening to our episode with Maya Raichura. I'll link it in the show notes. For an anti-people-pleasing visualization, take 2 minutes to picture yourself calmly and confidently setting a boundary. So this might be before a big meeting or just as you're on your way to a social plan. This is going to feel silly at first, but it works because your brain finds it hard to distinguish between imagination and reality. So this primes you to feel more capable when real life situations arise. If you're not quite open to visualization just yet, even writing down what you want to say can really, really help. I used to always do that before a meeting when I knew I needed to have a hard conversation, and I still sometimes do this now. And finally, number 5 is to set yourself a daily me first challenge. Once a day, Choose one small way to prioritize yourself instead of someone else. So whether it's choosing what you want for dinner or turning down something that doesn't serve you, I couldn't believe more strongly that small actions compound into lasting change. So if you people please less in your home life, you are less likely to want to do it at work or with your mates. I think it's important to say that these strategies do not always work when you're trying to run a business and be a good friend and manage a team and do 100 million things at once, as we all need to do. Of course, running a scale-up business or doing your job doesn't always love respecting boundaries, but I think deep down we all probably know when we're being people pleasers versus when we just need to get involved and help someone out or prioritize clarity. And taking the time to recognize that can make all the difference. Now, as always, it's time to speak to the expert. I spoke to Emma Reed Turrell, a psychotherapist and author of Please Yourself, How to Stop People Pleasing and Transform the Way You Live, about how to actually tackle people pleasing on a day-to-day level.
Okay, so how do we actually tackle people pleasing behaviors on a day-to-day basis? The first step is to notice that that's what we're doing. Ask yourself, am I saying yes because I really mean it? Or am I saying yes because I'm not yet comfortable with someone else being uncomfortable? Now pause. These behaviors will have been around for a long time, so I need you to create a little bit of wiggle room between you and some of those default settings. Let yourself answer with, I don't know yet. When do you need to know by? Or, let me think about that. Give yourself some time to think differently. Now tune into your discomfort. If your body doesn't want you to do something, if your body says no, that discomfort is data. It's not something to be overridden. It's something to be listened to and honored. Make friends with your discomfort. It's got your best interests at heart. And reframe guilt. Guilt will come up as that default feeling when we're not making someone happy, but it isn't really guilt because we haven't objectively done anything wrong. Call it something else. Call it tension. Call it unfamiliar behavior, difference, change. But really start to have a different relationship with what you've previously called guilt. And think about the difference between being selfish and self-aware. Self-aware as in knowing your needs, your preferences, your priorities, not saying me first, but certainly saying me too, is a gift to you, but also to the people around you. And when you model that permission to others, it's even more so. But start small. Don't dive into those high risk, high reward relationships. Maybe it's not your family of origin. Maybe it's not your boss, but start to use these tools and techniques somewhere where it's less risky, maybe with an acquaintance or someone you bump into in the supermarket. Work towards those higher risk, higher reward relationships when you've got more evidence that you can stop people pleasing and still be okay. And remember that people pleasing rarely pleases people, least of all you. Good luck.
Emma's advice was so amazing. You should really read her book too. I absolutely loved it. Okay, I think I have yapped on for long enough. That is it for today's episode on people pleasing, and I hope this has been useful. As I said, it's something I'm very much still working on, but the more I think about it, the more likely I am to actually take action. So thank you for helping me keep accountable. And as always, I've only just scratched the surface. So if you do want to dive deeper, I've included a reading list with some of my favorite books and resources on this topic in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And if you take one thing away from this episode, it should be that you are allowed to set boundaries and prioritize yourself without guilt.